What would you do if one day your family called you back for a gathering only to demand that you pay off a $300,000 debt for your sister? I've been in that exact situation. They threw pumpkin pie and splashed wine in my face when I said no. Why did they treat me like that? And what did I do to protect myself? Stay with me. I will tell you what happened. Hello, everyone. My name is Hillary. I'm 30 years old and currently living in San Jose, California. I currently work as a software engineer for one of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley, with an income of nearly $200,000 a year from base salary and bonuses. I've been able to own a 3-bedroom house in this area. From the outside, people might think I'm living the kind of life anyone would dream of. But what most people don't know is that I had to sacrifice a lot to protect this peace. The most painful of all was cutting ties completely with my parents and older sister. And even though it's been over 2 years, the memories of that fateful day are still vivid in my mind. The story I will share with you happened during Christmas of 2023. At that time, I hadn't yet bought the house I live in now. I was still renting a 1-bedroom place in the suburbs of San Jose, paying $1,500 a month. That tiny home was only about 650 feet. But to me, it was my own space, a place where I could live the way I wanted without anyone interfering. My original plan for Christmas 2023 was to take a trip to Lake Tahoe with my close friends. We had already booked a cabin, planned skiing, and organized a barbecue. I was genuinely excited about the trip because it felt like the perfect time to relax and recharge after a year of intense work. But a phone call from my mom on Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week before Christmas Eve, completely changed my plans. During that call, my mom said, "Hillary, it's been a long time since our family has had the chance to sit down together. I miss those Christmas dinners from when you were little, all gathered around the table." Hearing her words stirred up a complicated mix of emotions in me, warmth and bitterness all at once as old memories flooded back with deep emotion in her voice. She continued, "I hope you'll come home for Christmas dinner with the family. Emily and Jaden will be coming with Violet too. It would mean so much for the whole family to be together for this special occasion." Right then, my heart skipped a beat when I heard Emily's name, and her whole family would be there. I never felt comfortable showing up at family gatherings. Since I became an adult, those get-togethers have made me feel like an outsider. But there was something different about my mom's voice that day. Maybe it was the genuine care or a fundamental longing for the family to come back together. After hearing her kind and gentle words, a small spark of hope lit up inside me. I started to think maybe my family had changed how they saw me. Perhaps they had understood that success isn't just about fame or the numbers in your bank account. So, after a few moments of hesitation, I decided to cancel my Lake Tahoe trip and head back to Oakland for the family dinner. I didn't know then that it would be the last dinner I'd ever have with them. On the day of the party, worried about traffic, I left San Jose at 3:00 p.m. to drive to my parents' house in Oakland. Just as I expected, even though it was only a 40-minute drive, it took me nearly 2 hours to get there. The entire drive, I kept the radio on to distract myself from the anxious thoughts swirling around in my head about the night ahead. Part of me was excited to see my family again, but another part was nervous about the awkward conversations that might come up. I had even rehearsed a few safe topics, hoping to avoid the usual comparisons to Emily. When I pulled up to my parents' house, I immediately saw Emily's silver Honda Accord parked neatly in the driveway. And to my surprise, my dad, mom, and Emily stood on the front porch, smiling warmly as they opened the door to welcome me. After parking near Emily's, I grabbed the gift bags from the trunk. I had spent a lot of time picking these out. A bottle of fine wine for Dad, perfume for Mom, and toys for Violet. Holding the gifts in my hands, I hoped they would like them. As I walked up the driveway, my dad hugged me tightly. Then he said with genuine warmth, "Welcome home, daughter." Hearing those words made my chest tighten with emotion. It had been so long since Dad hugged me like that or said anything that heartfelt. After that, my mom said, "Let me take your coat." That small gesture brought back memories of my childhood, when she always cared for me whenever I came home. Emily and her husband Jaden came up to shake my hand, smiling as they greeted me. At that moment, my heart felt warm, seeing such friendliness from my brother-in-law, whom I hadn't spoken to much. Then my niece, Violet, Emily's daughter, came running up and wrapped her arms around me, saying, "Aunt Hillary, I missed you so much." Hearing her little voice made a natural smile spread across my face. She was only 5 then, but so bright and full of energy, always finding ways to bring joy to everyone around her. Feeling everyone's welcome and affection, I felt a deep warmth, and the tension I had been carrying started to fade. The worries that had followed me on the drive slowly melted away, replaced by a sense of peace and happiness. At that moment, I truly believed that Christmas that year would be warm and meaningful for all of us. I thought my family had changed, which could be a new beginning for us. After I arrived home, everyone gathered in the living room while Mom finished cooking dinner. That night, she made all my favorite dishes: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and garlic bread. The smell drifting from the kitchen filled the house, reminding me of the family dinners we used to have when I was little, back when everything felt joyful and straightforward. The living room was beautifully decorated for Christmas. A nearly 7-foot tall tree stood in the corner, adorned with red and gold ornaments and strands of twinkling lights. On the fireplace mantel, Mom had hung Christmas stockings with each family member's name, including mine. That small detail made me feel like I still belonged. While we waited, my parents and my sister's family kept asking me about work, life, and plans. Dad asked about the project I was working on at the company and whether I'd faced any challenges. Mom was concerned about whether I'd been eating well. Emily asked about the place I was renting and whether I needed financial advice. Even Jaden chimed in with recommendations for cool travel spots in California that I should check out. I felt happy, maybe for the first time, to receive this kind of attention from my family. In the past, that attention had always been reserved for Emily and her husband, Jaden. At previous gatherings, I usually sat quietly in a corner while everyone praised Emily for her career, her new house, or their latest luxury trip. Whenever I shared something, it was usually met with a quick, half-hearted response before the conversation drifted back to Emily. But today was different. They listened when I spoke, asked follow-up questions, and gave thoughtful advice. That unexpected warmth made me let my guard down. The walls I had built around myself started to come down, and I found myself opening up to them in a way I hadn't done in years. I talked about my career goals, desire to travel more, and even the challenges of living alone. And I truly believed that my family had changed. I thought maybe with age they had matured and realized how unfairly they had treated me in the past. Perhaps they had missed me. Maybe they genuinely wanted to rebuild our relationship. Violet ran around the room, occasionally stopping to hug me and show off the drawings she had just made. One of them was a picture of our whole family sitting around the dinner table, including me with a big smile on my face. That image made me believe this was the fresh start I had hoped for. I had no idea that just a few minutes later, they would rip off their mask and reveal a plan that would leave me shaken to the core. After 30 minutes of talking in the living room, dinner was finally ready. Mom called everyone over to the table, but my parents suggested we exchange Christmas gifts before we started eating. This had always been a long-standing family tradition, opening presents right at the dinner table before enjoying the meal. We all sat around the table, surrounded by the delicious dishes Mom had carefully prepared. They asked me to go first with my gifts. I quickly pulled out the presents I had brought with me. The first one was a bottle of expensive whiskey for my dad. When he opened it and saw what it was, he beamed with joy and thanked me warmly. Next was a bottle of perfume for my mom. She opened the box, sniffed, and smiled, saying it was the scent she loved. I also gave Emily a medical book I knew she'd been interested in, and I picked out a designer tie for Jaden. As for Violet, I got her a building block toy set she had been wanting for a long time. Violet ripped the wrapping open and squealed excitedly, jumping to hug me tightly. Emily and Jaden both thanked me sincerely. Seeing everyone's happiness as they opened their gifts made me feel warm. I had put a lot of thought into choosing each present, hoping to show my appreciation and affection for every one of them. After my turn, it was my parents' turn to give their gifts. My dad stood up and walked over to the Christmas tree. From underneath it, he picked up a neatly wrapped box in red paper with a golden ribbon. He handed it to me with a smile and said it was a special gift just for me. Holding that box in my hands, I felt like a 10-year-old kid again, bubbling with excitement. It had been a long time since my parents gave me a gift like this. In past Christmases, they usually gave Emily and her family presents, while I either got a small amount of cash or nothing. So receiving a gift that was so thoughtfully wrapped made me feel truly seen and appreciated. What I didn't know then was that the gift they gave me would leave me completely stunned and change my life forever. Curious about my family's gift, I eagerly opened it, my heart full of anticipation. My fingers carefully peeled back each layer of wrapping paper. I didn't want to tear it because I hoped to keep this memory. When I removed the final layer, there was just a single, neatly folded sheet of paper inside the box. I assumed they had written some heartfelt message, maybe a touching letter, or even a cash gift tucked inside. I quickly picked it up to read, and what I saw stopped me cold. When my eyes scanned the first few lines, my heart skipped a beat. It was a debt notice from the bank addressed to my sister. The amount printed in bold red letters, $300,000. I reread it, hoping I had misread the number, but no, it was precisely $300,000. My hands started to tremble as I held the paper, my brain scrambling to process what my eyes saw. Completely confused, I looked at my parents and asked, "Is this some mistake? Why is there a debt letter in my Christmas gift box?" At that point, my parents shook their heads thoughtfully. Then they began to explain everything. A year earlier, Emily and Jaden had taken out a mortgage on their house to borrow $300,000 and invest in a tech startup with a friend. This friend had promised that their money would triple in just 1 year. It sounded like the perfect investment opportunity. Emily and Jaden were so confident, they told my parents they'd be millionaires in no time. But before the year was even over, the project completely collapsed. The friend disappeared without a trace, and they found out the entire investment was gone. Emily and Jaden were now stuck with a $300,000 debt to the bank, and the interest was climbing fast. Hearing their story, I couldn't help but feel sad for Emily and Jaden. No matter what, they were still family, and losing that kind of money must have been devastating. At that moment, I started to piece together why my parents had insisted I come home for Christmas, but I needed to be sure. Trying to stay calm, though my heart was pounding, I asked, "So, what exactly is the reason you gave me this gift?" They looked at each other. A few seconds passed. Then, my mother answered in a voice so calm it felt cold. "Your father and I want you to help Emily pay off the debt." Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning. I was stunned. I immediately asked again, my voice shaking, "You're not serious, right? That's $300,000, not 300." Every word felt heavy coming out of my mouth. I still hoped Mom would laugh and say this was a terrible joke, but the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. After my question, Mom didn't respond. She just stared down at her plate. That's when Dad jumped in. He spoke to me with a firm, almost commanding tone. "Right now, you're the only one who can help Emily's family. You know the situation your sister is in." Hearing my father's words so forceful and full of expectation, a wave of anger began to rise inside me. Still, I held myself back and said, "I don't have that kind of money." That wasn't entirely true, but I wasn't about to reveal the full details of my finances. I had worked hard and saved carefully for years. Then Emily suddenly spoke up. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're lying. You have nearly $800,000 in your savings account. You have to help me." Her words stunned me into silence. She was right. I did have that much money, even a little more. After 6 years of earning a high salary, living frugally, and making smart investments, I built substantial savings. But I had never shared that with anyone, not even my closest friends. That Emily knew the exact amount in my account deeply violated me. It was a serious breach of privacy. In a cold voice, I asked, "How do you know how much money I have?" Emily hesitated. For a second, she looked thrown off. Her expression faltered with a flicker of guilt. After a brief silence, she replied unconvincingly, "I just guessed. You've been working for 6 years, and your salary's high. It's not hard to figure." Her answer was full of holes and blatant lies. No one could randomly guess an exact figure like that, not down to the detail. I suspected she had hacked into my bank account, or maybe someone at the bank had helped her check my balance. Either way, it was a massive invasion of my privacy. But I didn't push further. I knew that someone willing to lie so boldly would never give me the truth. And honestly, at that moment, the more important question wasn't how Emily knew. It was when they had started planning all of this and how many people were involved. The atmosphere at the dinner table turned suffocating. I looked around. My parents sat there with serious faces as if we were discussing the weather. Emily and Jaden stared at me with hopeful, expectant eyes. Only Violet seemed unaware, happily playing with her new toys, oblivious to the tension building around her. That's when it finally hit me. The whole evening, from Mom's warm invitation to the cheerful welcome, The thoughtful questions about my life. All of it had been a carefully staged performance. They hadn't changed. They hadn't missed me. They just wanted my money to clean up Emily's mess. The sense of betrayal spread through me like poison. I had foolishly believed that my family had finally come to value me. But the truth was, to them, I was nothing more than an ATM. After Emily revealed the amount in my savings, $800,000, the air in the dining room grew so thick with tension it felt hard to breathe. The four sat silently, arms crossed, waiting for my answer. Only Violet remained blissfully unaware, still focused on the toy I had just given her. I could feel the weight of their stares pressing down on me. Dad sat upright, his hands resting on the table, wearing a stern expression, like he was waiting for the outcome of a high-stakes business deal. Mom kept glancing at me, then at Emily, as if calculating the best way to convince me. Emily and Jaden leaned slightly in their seats, their eyes locked on mine, filled with hope, desperation, and just a hint of panic. As for me, I was thinking through the entire situation. $300,000 wasn't small, not even for me, and the truth was, I had no obligation to help them. After about 2 minutes of silence, I looked at each of them, from Dad to Mom, then to Emily and Jaden. Finally, I said in a cold, firm voice, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." The room exploded. The tense silence was shattered by shouting and accusations. Emily and Jaden lashed out at me as if I had just committed some unforgivable crime. Emily jumped out of her chair, her face flushed with anger, pointing directly at Violet, who sat quietly beside her. Emily shouted at me with a voice full of rage and emotion. "You're seriously going to let Violet end up on the streets? Do you even realize we're about to lose our home?" Hearing her name, Violet looked up in confusion. She clearly didn't understand what was happening, only that her mom was speaking loudly and didn't seem happy. Jaden jumped in right after. He looked at me with eyes filled with bitterness and said, "You're selfish. Family is supposed to help each other. This isn't the time to be calculating." Their words, especially dragging Violet into this, made me laugh out loud. A few seconds later, I responded calmly but with a sharp edge in my voice. "I've been on my own since I was 18. Don't forget, right after I graduated, I came to your house and asked to borrow $5,000 for a used car so I could get to work, and you told me no. You said I needed to figure it out myself." The moment I said it, the room fell silent again. Emily and Jaden looked at each other, stunned, clearly not expecting me to remember that. Emily's face went pale, and Jaden stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes, his expression full of shame. But my parents wouldn't let it go. They were willing to do anything to protect their golden child, even if it meant turning on their daughter. My father, his face twisted with rage, pointed straight at me and shouted, "You don't have a husband or kids. You should be the one paying that debt. What do you even need all that money for living alone?" His scream echoed through the room, loud and violent. It startled Violet, who looked up at her grandfather with wide, frightened eyes. She immediately curled up against Emily, clearly shaken and looking for comfort. Her eyes welled up with tears, scared by the shouting. At that moment, I stared at my father in disbelief. The man I once respected stood before me like a stranger, someone willing to hurt me to protect Emily. My mother jumped in with a cold, unwavering voice when he finished yelling. She said, "If you refuse to help this family in our time of need, then don't ever return to this house again. We don't need a selfish daughter." Those words, sharp and cruel, felt like knives piercing through my chest. The woman who once sang me to sleep, cared for me when I was sick, and used to say she loved me, was now disowning me for not handing over my savings to bail out Emily. Hearing them speak like that, I realized how badly I had misjudged the situation. I had let emotion cloud my judgment. I had believed they genuinely wanted me home, that they missed me. But the truth was, I was just a backup plan in their financial disaster. A wave of fury rose inside me. I couldn't stand to be in that room another second. I stood up from my chair and turned to leave. I thought at worst they might throw a few more harsh words as I walked out the door. But what happened next went far beyond anything I could have imagined, and it forced me to call the police. As soon as I stood up and pushed my chair back, my dad stood up too, almost like a reflex. Before I could even process what was happening, he grabbed the pumpkin pie from the table and hurled it straight at my face with all his strength. The pie smashed into the left side of my face. The crust crumbled on impact, and the filling smeared across my skin. Bits dropped onto my white blouse, leaving sticky orange stains. But it didn't stop there. Emily rose from her seat right after him. Without hesitating, she picked up a glass of red wine and threw it straight at me. The cold wine splashed across my face, soaking my hair and dripping onto the floor. The pungent smell of alcohol filled my nose, mixing with the sickly sweet scent of pumpkin pie into a nauseating stench. My blouse was now stained in red and orange. I looked like some deranged abstract painting. Then my mom screamed, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. "Get out of my house and don't ever come back." Her shout echoed through the entire home, making Violet burst into tears. She couldn't understand why everyone suddenly turned so violent, or why they were throwing food at me. Jaden quickly pulled her into his arms and covered her eyes, trying to shield her from the scene. I stood there soaked and filthy, feeling like time had come to a halt. Drops of wine continued to fall from my chin to the floor, leaving red streaks that looked disturbingly like blood. Crushed bits of pie clung to my cheek, a symbol of humiliation. In that moment, I realized something that cut deeper than anything they had thrown at me. The people I once called family had become strangers. Strangers who were willing to publicly shame me and use violence simply because I wouldn't give in to their outrageous demands. The smell of wine and pie on my body made me sick to my stomach. But worse than the physical mess was the pain of knowing, without a doubt, that I had lost my family for good. Feeling utterly humiliated and hurt, I decided to call the police. With a trembling hand, I pulled my phone out of my pocket, trying not to let the dripping wine soak the screen. My fingers, sticky with pumpkin pie, tapped in 911. The moment they saw me holding my phone and heard the words, "I need the police," come out of my mouth, they moved like a trained unit. Dad and Jaden rushed toward me from either side. Emily positioned herself behind me. Mom blocked the doorway in front. Together, they shoved me out of the house with no care for whether I fell or got hurt. Their only goal was to get me out and shut me down. I stumbled onto the porch, still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher. Seconds later, slam. The door was slammed shut behind me, and I heard the deadbolt lock turn from the inside. Through the front window, I could see them moving quickly around the house, scrambling to clean up or get ahead of whatever was coming. I didn't wipe my face. I didn't change my clothes or try to make myself presentable. I wanted everything, the wine-soaked hair, the pie crust on my cheek, the stains on my blouse, to stay exactly as it was. This was my proof. The stench of alcohol and pumpkin made me nauseous, but I held on. I needed the police to see me exactly like this, to understand what had just happened. I sat on the porch steps and waited, feeling the cold Oakland night seep through my soaked clothes. 20 minutes later, a police car pulled up, red and blue lights flashing in the dark. 2 officers stepped out, a middle-aged man and a younger Latina woman. Their expressions shifted to concern when they saw me still covered in pie and wine. The male officer approached and asked gently, "Are you okay?" I nodded and told him I was physically fine. Then I explained everything, every detail of what had happened, and asked if they could enter the house to speak with my family. The officers walked up the porch and knocked. It took about 5 minutes of back and forth before my family finally agreed to open the door and let them in. When the officers brought me back inside, I was stunned by what I saw. In just 20 minutes, they had cleaned everything. The dining table had been wiped spotless. There was no trace of wine, no bits of pumpkin pie, no evidence that anything had been thrown at me. When the officers began asking questions, my family played it cool, as if nothing had happened. They claimed I had been disowned due to aggressive behavior and was no longer welcome in the home. They denied everything, said no one had thrown anything at me. Emily went so far as to suggest that I had staged the whole thing. She calmly told the officers that maybe I had poured wine and smeared pie on myself to make them look bad. Then, with a voice full of fake concern, my mother turned to the officers and said, "We don't know why Hillary would do something like this. She hasn't been emotionally stable lately." My father nodded in agreement, adding, "We're genuinely worried about her mental health. Maybe she needs professional help." Hearing those words, I went completely numb. I stood there surrounded by the very people who raised me, people who not long ago I would have done anything to reconnect with. Now, watching them lie to the police without a second thought. Not only had they physically attacked me, but now they were trying to destroy my reputation, my credibility, even my sanity. At that moment, something inside me broke, or maybe it finally snapped into place. These people weren't my family anymore. Whatever they used to be, parents, sister, that was gone. What stood in front of me were strangers. Strangers willing to do anything to protect themselves, even if it meant completely erasing who I was. Violet suddenly spoke up while the officers struggled to make sense of the conflicting accounts. The 5-year-old had been sitting quietly in the corner the entire time, unnoticed, unheard. With a clear, innocent voice, Violet said, "Earlier, I saw Grandpa throw pumpkin pie at Aunt Hillary's face, and Mommy poured wine on her. Why is everyone lying now?" Her words hit the room like a bomb. Emily immediately rushed over and covered her daughter's mouth, her eyes wide with panic, realizing what had just happened. But it was too late. Both officers had heard every word loud and clear. The male officer turned sharply toward Emily and said in a firm, commanding tone, "Ma'am, take your hand off her and let her speak." Meanwhile, the female officer calmly approached Violet, kneeling to her level and speaking gently. "Sweetheart, can you tell me exactly what happened?" Violet nodded and began to explain, her words devastating but straightforward. "I was playing with my toys when I heard a loud noise. I saw Grandpa throw the pie at Aunt Hillary's face. Then Mommy threw her drink on her. She got all wet on her face and clothes." Each word out of her mouth completely shattered the carefully crafted lie my family had spent the last 20 minutes building. The two officers exchanged a glance, then turned back to my parents and Emily. The male officer's voice turned hard. "You need to tell the truth right now. If not, we will call Child Protective Services. Violet will be removed temporarily and interviewed separately." The moment the words Child Protective Services were spoken, Emily and Jaden's faces went pale. They knew what that meant. An official investigation, possible loss of custody, and a permanent mark on their parental record. My father was the first to break. He sank into a chair, his expression crumbling, and said, "All right, we did what the little girl said." My mother gave a slow, reluctant nod and added quietly, "We lost our temper and acted out. It was wrong." Realizing there was no way out, Emily began to tell the truth. She admitted that after my father threw the pie, she had tossed the wine in my face. She also acknowledged demanding that I pay the $300,000 debt she and Jaden had accumulated. Jaden followed, confirming his wife's statement and apologizing for the family's actions. Hearing their admissions didn't erase the pain, but in that moment, I felt a strange kind of relief. After everything, at least the truth had finally been spoken. Throughout the entire statement process, I stood there listening, overwhelmed by a mix of emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of relief. The truth had finally come out. On the other hand, I felt a deep sadness, knowing that my own family had been willing to lie to the police, to cover up what they had done to me. The female officer took detailed notes of everyone's statements and photographed my soiled state as evidence. She asked if I wanted to go to the hospital for a medical checkup, but I declined. No real injuries, just food thrown at me, not physical harm. After they finished taking statements from everyone involved, the male officer turned to me and said, "You have the right to press charges for assault and public humiliation. We'll file a report and forward the case to the court." He also scheduled a follow-up 2 days later at the police station, so I could finalize the paperwork and decide whether or not I wanted to move forward with legal action. I nodded and thanked both officers for handling the situation fairly. Inside, I knew I wouldn't let this go. They hadn't just physically assaulted me, they had tried to discredit me, twist the truth, and ruin my name right in front of law enforcement. As I turned to leave, Violet ran up and wrapped her arms around my leg. She looked up at me and said softly, "Aunt Hillary, I'm sorry they hurt you." I gently touched her head and thanked her for telling the truth. Of everyone in that house, only Violet, a 5-year-old child, had the courage and integrity to stand up and speak honestly. After saying goodbye to Violet, I headed to my car. Luckily, I always keep 2 or 3 clean outfits in the trunk. It's a habit I picked up back in college, just in case something unexpected happens, like spilling food or getting caught in bad weather. I quickly changed out of my dirty clothes in my family's driveway, trying to wipe off the bits of pumpkin pie still stuck to my face and hair. Then I drove straight back to San Jose. The drive took nearly an hour through the quiet night with empty streets and only the dim glow of streetlights. I played soft music for background noise, but my mind couldn't stop replaying everything that had just happened. Behind the wheel, I kept thinking about the night. From Mom's warm phone call a week ago to the enthusiastic welcome when I arrived home, then the horrifying gift. And finally, they threw food at my face. It all felt like a horror movie I never imagined I'd star in. I found myself drifting into memories, all the blatant favoritism they showed Emily, family dinners where I sat silently while they praised my sister's accomplishments, and all I got were vague nods. The times I asked for help and was turned down, while Emily was always prioritized and fully supported. When my rental house finally came into view, it felt like I was being pulled back to reality. That little house suddenly felt like the safest place on earth. After carefully parking in the garage, I made my way inside with heavy steps. I didn't even bother turning on the living room lights. I headed straight to the bathroom, cranked the water on full blast, and stood under the shower, letting it wash away the worst parts of today. Not just the smell of wine and pumpkin pie, but the humiliation, the anger, and the hurt that clung to me. 2 days later, as scheduled, I arrived at the Oakland police station at precisely 2 p.m. As I walked inside, I saw my parents, Emily and Jaden, already there, sitting in the chairs in the waiting area. The air in the room was thick with tension. My parents sat side by side, their faces serious, like they were attending some important meeting. Emily and Jaden were in the row behind them, whispering to each other occasionally. When they saw me walk in, no one greeted me, not even a glance in my direction. Officer Martinez, who had handled the situation that night, led us into a small conference room with a long table and swivel chairs. He opened a folder and reviewed the notes from Christmas Eve. The police proposed a mediation, suggesting that my family could offer a formal apology and a small financial settlement to resolve the matter without going to court. They explained that this approach would save both sides time and money and help avoid unnecessary family tension. My parents and Emily seemed willing to accept the mediation. They sat there looking hopeful, as if they believed a quick apology and a bit of money would be enough to make everything disappear. Emily even mentioned that this was a private family issue and shouldn't be made public. But I wasn't willing to settle in any way. After what they did to me, not just throwing food, but scheming to deceive me and trying to frame me in front of the police, I made it clear I was going to press charges and take this all the way. As soon as I said that, the air in the room turned suffocating. Emily's jaw dropped, and Jaden stared at me like he couldn't believe what he heard. My mom clutched my dad's arm tightly, her eyes filled with panic. My father stood up, looked me straight in the eyes with a challenging stare, and said, "If you want to take your parents to court, go ahead. I'm not afraid." His voice was sharp and confrontational, like he was talking to an enemy, not his daughter. He kept up his defiant attitude, claiming that no court would believe my accusations because they were respected community members. But I had decided, and I wasn't backing down. What they did to me that Christmas night couldn't be erased with a simple apology or a token amount of money. 2 months later, the trial took place at the Alameda County Courthouse. That day, I invited extended family to attend. I wanted them to see the truth about what had happened in our family. The courtroom wasn't large, but carried a sense of solemnity, with the judge's bench elevated above the rest. I sat beside my attorney, a seasoned, middle-aged man experienced in family cases. On the other side, my parents and Emily sat with their lawyer. Throughout the trial, the evidence was presented in detail. Security footage from a neighbor's camera showed me walking out of the house with filthy clothes. The police report documented Violet's statement and the contradictions in my family's original account. Photos of my clothes stained with wine and pumpkin pie were also submitted as evidence. My lawyer laid out a clear case for assault and defamation. He emphasized that throwing food at someone in their own home wasn't just an act of aggression. It was a serious act of humiliation. He also pointed out that my family's attempt to mislead the police showed they knew their actions were wrong. Their lawyer tried to downplay it by calling it a family dispute and claiming his clients had acted out of frustration. He also brought up Emily's financial struggles and the general stress everyone was under. But the judge, a stern woman in her early 50s, wasn't swayed by those excuses. After reviewing all the evidence and hearing every testimony, she delivered her verdict. With a firm voice, the judge ruled, "This court finds Thomas Miller and Emily Johnson liable to compensate Hillary Miller for $4,000 for assault and defamation." She also ordered that my parents cover the full legal fees for both parties, nearly $8,000. On top of that, they were required to attend a 6-month anger management course mandated by the court. As the hearing ended, I felt a deep sense of relief. Justice had finally been served. It wasn't about the money, but the truth being officially acknowledged. After the trial, the relatives who had come to witness the proceedings looked at my parents and Emily's family with visible disappointment and contempt. Aunt Helen shook her head in disbelief while Uncle Robert avoided eye contact with my father. Our family's whispers and judgmental glances likely hurt more than the court's ruling ever could. Emily and my parents left the courthouse in silence, unable to meet anyone's eyes. It's been over 2 years since the trial. I used my $800,000 savings to buy a 3-bedroom house, the one I'm living in now. It's located in a quiet neighborhood in San Jose. My life these days is truly peaceful. I sip coffee in the kitchen every morning while looking out at the backyard through the large window. I work from home 3 days a week, travel when I feel like it, and have complete control over how I spend my time. Meanwhile, my parents couldn't save Emily. She eventually had to sell her house below market value to pay off the bank. Now, Emily, Jaden, and Violet live in a cramped 2-bedroom rental on the far side of Oakland. I heard Emily's been picking up night shifts at the hospital to make ends meet. My parents have also faced the consequences of their actions. The extended family has completely shut them out. The family gatherings where they used to be the center of attention no longer include them. Aunt Helen and Uncle Robert have cut off all contact, and other relatives avoid them during the holidays. Interestingly, Violet and I have managed to keep a good relationship. She's 7 now, just as bright and sweet as ever. I still send her gifts for her birthday and on special occasions. At first, Emily tried to stop it, but Violet cried and insisted she wanted to keep in touch with Aunt Hillary. Ultimately, Emily gave in because she didn't want to upset her daughter. Once a month, Violet and I meet at a park halfway between San Jose and Oakland. She tells me about school, the books she's reading, and her dreams for the future. In those moments, I feel like I still have a piece of real family. Most importantly, I feel entirely at peace in this life. There's nothing to regret about cutting off toxic relationships, even if they're with your flesh and blood. The peace and freedom I found are worth more than any fake sense of family unity. And today, after seeing a close friend go through something eerily similar to what I experienced, I was reminded of my own story and decided it's time to share it with you. That friend is also being asked by his family to cover a massive debt they created. And just like I once was, he's stuck in a tough spot, unsure whether to help or walk away. Watching him struggle with stress, sleepless nights, and the pressure from his family made me realize my story might help others facing the same situation. Way too many of us are being taken advantage of, financially pressured, and emotionally guilt-tripped just because we're doing a little better in life. Through the story, I want to share an important message. Sometimes you must say no and stand up for yourself. Setting boundaries with family doesn't mean you're cold or selfish. It means you're protecting yourself from toxic relationships and from being treated like a human ATM. I get it. Cutting ties with family is never easy. Society pushes this idea that family is everything. But the truth is not every relationship deserves to be kept. If all it brings is pain, pressure, and manipulation, then walking away is sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for your mental well-being. For the past 2 years, I've lived with a sense of peace I never had before. I don't get calls demanding money. I don't have to endure being compared to others. And I'm no longer forced into tense, uncomfortable family gatherings. Instead, I get to focus on my work, build meaningful relationships, and create the life I want. That's the end of my story. But before I go, I want to ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you help your family to keep the peace, or would you say no and protect what you've worked so hard to build? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear your stories and perspectives. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it. Someone out there might need to hear this message about setting boundaries with family. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my story.